Your sister Lisa looks just like me, and she's beautiful. But compared to her, you are. My mother always said this to me. Her words were sharp, and as a child, I often felt sad. I am Isabella. I recently turned 31. My sister, Lisa, is 33. The two of us, sisters with a 2-year difference, were always compared. The beautiful one and the ugly one, that's how my mother always introduced us. Indeed, my sister resembled our mother, who had been a magazine model and a TV reporter in her youth, with a face as cute as a Barbie doll. In contrast, I looked nothing like my mother, with single eyelids just like Dad's and a plain, simple face. My mother never once praised me. Before starting elementary school, my sister was already taking numerous lessons in arts like ballet and singing. As she reached the upper grades, her lesson days increased even more. Watching my sister practice singing and dancing at home piqued my interest, and I once asked my mother if I could take lessons like her. However, my mother just scoffed, "No need for an ugly girl like you." In the end, I was never allowed to take any lessons, since my mother always accompanied my sister to her lessons. No one was home when I returned from elementary school. Often, my mother wouldn't prepare dinner, and I couldn't even eat an evening meal. Seeing this, my maternal grandmother, who lived alone after my grandfather's passing a few years ago, would say, "Come to my house after school." From then on, I started heading to my grandmother's house after school. My grandmother was living alone nearby, after losing her husband a few years ago. I loved my grandmother. She treated my sister and me equally, and I also loved that she would scold me properly when I did something wrong, not just pamper me. Spending afternoons at my grandmother's house transformed my gloomy, boring days. Whenever I came home from school, my grandmother always greeted me with a warm smile. She readily allowed me to invite friends over. She had always been a great cook and prepared homemade snacks and dinners for me. One day, while eating a dinner my grandmother made, I was so impressed by its deliciousness that I exclaimed, "Grandma, you're like a magician." "Oh, thank you. But it's not magic. You can make it too." "Really? Can I?" "Yes. Just don't mess up the steps." "Shall we make it together next time?" "Yes." Later, I stood in the kitchen with my grandmother for the first time and made meat and potatoes. Peeling vegetables was hard and they didn't look great. But thanks to my grandmother's teaching, I was confident in the taste. I packed the first meat and potatoes I made into a Tupperware and took it home, hoping my family would be pleased. However, my homemade dish was never touched by anyone and ended up in the trash. My mother said, "I don't want to eat such a country-style dish." And my sister said, "Ugliness is contagious." My father was late due to work, but I waited up late, hoping he would be pleased. I eagerly told him about the meat and potatoes, but he coldly brushed me off. "I've already eaten out. Talk to your mom about that." My father was a leading figure at his company and was too busy to spend time with us. Though we were never short on money thanks to him, I never felt loved by my family. My mother and sister, who mocked and treated me coldly, and my indifferent father, made me think that maybe, if I made the effort, we could get along. My handmade meat and potatoes, along with my feelings, seemed to be thrown away in the trash. That night, I cried under the covers, stifling my voice. I was furious that I was crying because of such a family. From then on, I decided never to expect anything from them again. Never to think of them as family. Later, I entered junior high school and joined the track team. I got hooked on long-distance running and practiced daily. Thanks to my efforts, my record improved rapidly, and in my 3rd year, I made it through the regional tournament to the state tournament. My grandmother always came to cheer for me at the track meets, but my family never did. As this became the norm, I grew tired of returning home and ended up living at my grandmother's house. Meanwhile, my sister, still beautiful and popular at school, never seemed to have a boyfriend. When I asked her, "Why don't you have a boyfriend?" "Because there are only ugly or stupid guys. No one is good enough for me." I responded with a smile, "Is that so?" but thought to myself, "Not stupid, maybe just ugly." "But you are stupid, huh?" My sister was busy with lessons and maintaining her looks. And her academic performance was poor. Yet, my mother never scolded her, always accepting it as a beauty doesn't need that, and continued to insult me. You're always so ugly. You'll never get married. I grew accustomed to my mother's words and no longer felt hurt, just sighed. Hey, Mom, is there any value in something that's only beautiful on the surface but black on the inside? At one point, when I casually asked a question, my mother looked puzzled and tilted her head. Couldn't she even understand the sarcasm? It was pitiful, despite her being my parent. Without any real interaction with my family. I commuted to university from my grandmother's house, graduated safely, got a job, and started living alone. On my 25th birthday, I called home for the first time in a long while. I'm getting married next year. I want to set the date, so could you let me know when Mom, Dad, and Lisa are available to attend the wedding? Then, over the phone, my mother sneered. So there's someone willing to marry a plain girl like you? We won't be attending, just go ahead without worrying about us. Lisa is becoming a well-known TV reporter. It would be troublesome if people knew she had an ugly sister like you. My family hadn't changed at all. I said, I won't contact you again. Goodbye. I had thought that announcing my marriage would be the last chance to reconcile with my family. I owed my parents for raising me, after all. Although most of my upbringing was thanks to my grandmother. My parents had managed to provide for my education. I thought showing them my happiness at the wedding might repay that debt. But they considered even that a bother. Then, I have nothing to repay. My family now is just my grandmother and the man I'm about to marry, who is 5 years older than me. My parents have become nothing more than strangers to me. The year after I vowed to cut ties with my parents, I got married. 5 years later, at age 31. I was relaxing in the living room with my husband when the phone rang. The caller was unknown, so my husband answered. She says she's your mother. What, my mom? I nearly dropped my coffee cup in surprise. Especially since she somehow knew our home phone number, which I hadn't given her. Knowing the situation with my parents, my husband asked, Are you okay? Should I pretend you're not here? But I had no reason to hide. I steeled myself and took the phone. Mom, what do you want? Weren't you on TV the other day? What's that all about? That was her greeting. What do you mean? If you saw it, you'd know. Why are you calling yourself a beautiful, slender chef? I hadn't called myself that. It was just how the program's subtitles introduced me as a guest. Let's go back a bit. A year after my mother refused to attend my wedding, we had our ceremony. Following the wedding, I quit my full-time job and started working part-time. Considering our division of roles, with my husband busy with work, I took on the main household duties. Although busy with household tasks, having more free time than when I was a full-timer allowed me to revisit my hobby of cooking. While searching for recipes online, I thought I could do it too. So I started a blog and began posting original recipes. Eventually, my blog became popular, views skyrocketed. And I ended up publishing a cookbook. The beautiful, slender chef was a catchphrase the editor came up with when the book was published. It was a bit embarrassing. But I was pleased since I had been careful about maintaining my style. Cooking wasn't my only hobby. I had continued long-distance running, which I started during my student days. I met my husband at a community half-marathon. He was struggling with a broken shoelace when I approached him. Running made meals tastier, and it helped maintain my figure and fitness. That was a perfect combination for me. Back to the sudden call from my mother. She was yelling loudly. You're being called a slender beauty and getting carried away. But your face has changed. Did you have plastic surgery? I didn't do such a thing. Then why are you being called beautiful? I was fed up with her baseless accusations, but it triggered my fight mode. Look, beauty standards vary by person. You think beauty means perfect eyes and a doll-like face, but we live in an era of diversity. There are various standards for beauty and cuteness. Plus, there are plenty of makeup techniques that make someone with single eyelids like me look beautiful. As I spoke calmly and clearly, my mother's breathing grew ragged. Shut up, shut up. You, an ugly liar, shouldn't be lecturing me. My mother yelled and hung up the phone. Her loud voice had reached my husband, who peeked at my face and asked, "Are you okay?" I smiled and firmly said, "I'm fine. She's no longer family or anything to me." A few days later, I received a call from my maternal aunt, who lived far away and had always been critical of my parents, worrying about me occasionally. "Your mom called me. You were on TV?" "Oh, what now? I missed recording it, you should have told me." "Sorry. It's a bit embarrassing." "Did Mom say anything strange?" "She did. She said you had plastic surgery." I told her not to say such silly things. Then, my aunt told me about the current situation of my mother and sister. Lisa, who had thoroughly groomed her appearance, was hired as a regional TV reporter but was soon fired due to her bad attitude and habit of being late. After that, she could only get jobs like being a model for mail-order catalogs, but no one requested her again because she was always demanding on set. Eventually, her talent agency terminated her contract, and now she is just staying at home. Soon after hearing about my mother and sister, I returned home from shopping and found my mother standing in front of my house. She was looking around when she quickly noticed me and hurried over. "Hey, hello." She smiled at me as if nothing had happened. "Why do you know where this is?" I was completely shocked. "Because you wouldn't tell me where you live." I had to sneak around like a thief. "A thief? What did you do exactly?" "Stop nagging." I secretly looked at Granny's notebook at her house and followed her when she was going to your house. The Granny my mother mentioned is my dear grandmother. I sometimes invite my grandmother to my house to cook together, and it seems she targeted that. "Hey, I have a favor to ask. With your cooking, somehow make Lisa lose weight and get her back on TV. If she loses weight, she's definitely cuter than you." "If she loses weight." What happened to Lisa? She lost her job and now just eats junk food and sleeps at home, getting fatter by the day. The fact that you're on TV and publishing books is also stressing her out, so take some responsibility. My mother's mind seems as clouded with fat as her speech. I finally let out everything I had been holding back. "I don't care about Lisa's stress. Why don't you make her do some housework or exercise?" My mother finally broke down crying. "If I could make her, I would. No matter what I say, she just acts all high and mighty." Even as my mother broke down, I felt cold. It was she who never let Lisa do any housework because laundry would ruin her hands and cooking might lead to an injury. "I have an idea. Let Lisa live at your house. You have a big house with spare rooms, right?" I couldn't understand what my mother was suddenly suggesting. "My husband and I built our house on his parents' property." "That's impossible." "What do you mean impossible?" "I can't take care of Lisa anymore." My mother's voice was loud enough to be heard by my in-laws. The gate opened, and my in-laws came out from the house, ready to call the police. Calling the police is an exaggeration. "I'm your mother, right?" In the face of this sudden escalation, my mother panicked. "It's not an exaggeration. My husband and father-in-law are doctors. Calling the police to protect a wealthy family's home is the right decision." Seeing the grand gate and high walls of my in-laws' home, my mother must have realized how affluent my in-laws were. She had nothing to say to my rebuttal. Besides, if Lisa truly wants to lose weight, she should come and ask for herself, shouldn't she? Hearing me say that, my mother left with a sour face. Eventually, I never heard from Lisa. Just as expected. The beautiful sister and the ugly sister. Such fixed notions wouldn't easily be set aside by her. It's just a guess, but probably not far off. Later, my mother appeared near our home a few times, desperate and lurking around, peeking from behind telephone poles at our house. Her suspicious behavior was so conspicuous that a neighbor called the police. After that, my mother stopped appearing around my home. Though she stopped coming, after a few silent calls, I had to block her number. 6 months after my mother's visit, I got a call from my aunt. Listen. Your sister had 3 matchmaking meetings. My mother had arranged the matchmaking. Lisa had to choose between losing weight and returning to show business or giving up and getting married. She chose the latter. The first matchmaking, she prepared photos from when she was thin and beautiful. But her date walked away without a word when he saw her in person. The second time, she used honest photos, but her unfriendly attitude angered the man. The third meeting went smoothly initially. But once it became clear she couldn't do much housework, she was quickly rejected. After these outcomes, Lisa threw a hysterical fit. "You'd better never go back to that house," my aunt said, laughing heartily. Well, either way, it's none of my concern. Sometime later, I found out I was pregnant. My husband and I had been trying to conceive since our 4th year of marriage. We had just started discussing fertility treatments if we didn't conceive within a year. I decided to quit my part-time job to focus on creating recipes and managing my health at home. From maternity to baby food, there are plenty of recipes I want to try. Today, my grandmother is also coming over to visit. This is going to be fun. As I rolled up my sleeves, I looked up at the dazzlingly clear sky.